Zawadi moved quickly through the light rain, one hand on her belly, telling herself she could make it. She even let out a small laugh at how stubborn she was being, but the laugh broke off when a sharp contraction hit. Her breath came short and she bent forward, one palm on her knee, waiting for the pain to ease. She kept going because she believed Kafel would be at his restaurant like he promised. When she reached the glowing neon sign and saw the place empty, her heart sank. People walked past, calling out friendly jokes, and she tried to smile, but it shook like it might fall apart. Another wave of pain rolled through her, and she knew this was the real start of labor. She tried calling for a taxi, but the drivers only shrugged and looked away as if this was someone else's problem. The rain grew heavier. Her legs weakened. She lowered herself onto the curb, gripping her belly and fighting panic. An old woman rushed over and wrapped a warm shawl around her shoulders. A small child beside her gasped at the sight, and the whole street seemed to pause as Zawadi struggled to breathe through the storm happening inside her own body. Zawadi pushed herself up from the curb and forced her shaking legs toward the place she once called her safe corner. As she walked, her mind flashed back to the early days with Kafel. She remembered the warm light inside that same restaurant, the way he smiled at her like she was the only person in the room. He used to hold her hands across the table and whisper little promises about their future, promises so small and sweet that she believed every one of them. She remembered him saying he would always show up for her. Those memories came in quick, bright bursts, almost painful in how gentle they felt compared to the cold night now pressing against her. When she reached the restaurant door, she leaned on it for balance, trying to catch her breath. Her voice shook as she called for help. The manager came out with a polite smile, the kind he used on difficult customers. At first he spoke softly, telling her to wait, telling her to calm down. But as she begged him again, his voice changed. He started offering excuses, saying there was no space, saying the diners could not be bothered, saying she needed to go somewhere else. Behind him, through the small kitchen window, she saw Kafel. He froze when he recognized her. Their eyes met for a heartbeat, then he quickly looked away and pretended to stir a pot, pretending he was too busy to step out. The staff shifted uncomfortably. A passerby slowed down, watching the strange scene, and let out a short laugh at the awkward tension. But the laugh died instantly when Zawadi cried out from another contraction. Her knees buckled for a moment. The manager stepped back as if her pain was too big for him to handle. People inside the restaurant paused with their forks halfway to their mouths. They heard the sound but didn't move. They looked toward the window, then back at their plates, trying to act like everything was normal. Zawadi pressed her hand against the restaurant door. Her knuckles turned white from how tightly she held on. She whispered Kafel's name even though she knew he would not come. The lights inside glowed warm and steady. The chatter faded into a quiet hum, and the door between them stayed shut as she stood outside, shaking, scared, and completely alone. People in Enzuri Market and Sango Bay heard the news almost before Zawadi herself understood what was happening. One whisper turned into 10, and soon the whole street seemed to shift toward her. A woman pushing a cart stopped first. She turned out to be an off-duty midwife, still wearing her faded uniform shirt. She knelt beside Zawadi and spoke in a calm voice, asking simple questions, checking her breathing, telling her she was not alone. A taxi uncle who had spent his life watching everything unfold on these streets came over too. He moved slowly, leaning on one knee, his eyes tired but kind, as if he had seen 100 scenes like this and knew exactly when to speak and when to keep quiet. A teenage boy appeared next, phone already raised. He thought maybe this moment could make him famous, but even he lowered the phone sometimes, looking worried when Zawadi cried out. Between contractions, she tried to stay steady by whispering small jokes, silly ones about the rain and her stubborn baby. The crowd let out gentle laughs, the kind people make when they are nervous but trying to help. Then another wave of pain hit her and pushed her down to her hands and knees. The laughter died at once. A few people gasped. Someone reached out a hand but hesitated, unsure if they should touch her. A vendor from the corner kiosk hurried over and tossed a blanket onto the wet ground. Others followed, bringing whatever they had. One woman brought sugar water in a plastic cup. A man handed over his jacket. The midwife guided Zawadi's breathing while wiping her forehead with a clean cloth she pulled from her bag. From a nearby shop, an old hymn floated out of a small radio, soft and steady, winding around the tense air like a quiet blessing. More people kept gathering until the whole street looked like a waiting room built out of strangers. Some were there out of worry, some out of curiosity, and some because the moment felt too big to ignore. The street buzzed with low voices, shuffling feet, and the uneven rhythm of Zawadi's breathing. It was messy but full of heart. People who had never met her before stood shoulder to shoulder, trying in their own small ways to help. In that crowded, chaotic stretch of road, the city paused to witness one woman's hardest hour and found itself pulled together by the simple truth that nobody should face pain like that alone. Inside the restaurant, Kafel stood half-hidden behind the swinging kitchen doors, his hands resting on the metal frame as if he needed it to stay upright. He watched the growing crowd outside, and every time someone bent over to help Zawadi, his chest tightened. He had promised her so many things inside this very place. He remembered the nights he held her hand over candlelight, saying he would always be there. He remembered the mornings he told her she could count on him. He also remembered the nights he ignored her calls because he didn't want to deal with hard conversations. Those memories flashed through him too fast, sharp and confusing, like a reel of film someone was spinning too quickly. His palms were sweating. A waiter asked what they should do, and Kafel's voice cracked as he said, "Just handle it." He didn't even know what that meant. He stepped back into the dining room, pretending everything was normal, but nothing felt normal. The customers looked up from their plates, unsure whether to ask about the noise outside. Kafel forced a small joke about the weather to calm them, and a few people laughed politely. Each laugh felt like a sting against his skin, as if the sound itself was accusing him of something he didn't want to name. Then another scream from outside cut through the chatter. It wasn't just loud. It was full of pain, the kind that makes a person stop breathing for a moment. Kafel flinched so visibly that a customer glanced at him. He pretended to adjust a plate on the table, pretending his hands weren't shaking. He tried to swallow the guilt climbing up his throat, but the sound of Zawadi's voice kept echoing in his ears. The kitchen behind him felt too hot, too bright, too exposed. The restaurant that once felt like his world now felt like a stage. Every light, every clink of a fork, every smile from a customer felt fake, like he was acting in a play he no longer wanted to be part of. Outside, life was happening in the rawest, realest way. Inside, he stood frozen, unsure if stepping out there would break him or finally force him to face the truth he had been running from. The midwife knelt beside Zawadi with the calm of someone who had guided many women through this moment. Her hands were steady, warm and sure. She told Zawadi when to breathe in and when to breathe out, when to push and when to rest. Zawadi tried to follow her voice even as pain made her whole body shake. Between contractions, she slipped into a strange rhythm, half crying and half singing. She whispered little stories to her unborn baby, stories about mango trees she climbed as a girl, stories about warm evenings and sweet fruit, stories about a father who once promised he would bring the moon home just to make them smile. Her voice cracked, but she kept talking because it steadied her heart. The teenage boy with the phone had meant to record something exciting, something he could post for likes. But as the moment grew more real, he lowered the phone for a second, stunned by the sight of Zawadi fighting through each breath. When the baby began to crown, he froze, eyes wide, then lifted the phone again as if he couldn't look away. Around him, the whole crowd leaned in, almost holding their breaths. The taxi uncle muttered a quiet prayer. The vendor pressed her hands together. Even people passing by stopped and felt the weight of the moment settle over them. Then, with one final push guided by the midwife's strong voice, the baby slipped into the midwife's arms. There was a heartbeat of silence, a strange stillness hanging over the street. And then the first cry burst out, sharp and angry, loud enough to cut through the rain and the street noise. It sounded like a tiny trumpet announcing its arrival to the entire city. People gasped, then laughed, then cried without caring who saw them. Tears ran down cheeks. Some shouted congratulations. Others just covered their mouths, overwhelmed by the raw beauty of the moment. Zawadi let out a trembling laugh as they placed the baby on her chest. She could barely believe this small, warm life was hers. The baby, still wet and new, reached up with tiny fingers and grabbed the necklace around her neck, pulling it with surprising strength. Zawadi laughed again, this time louder, her tears mixing with the rain. She held the child close, rocking gently, her whole body shaking with relief and joy. For a moment the street faded away, and all she felt was the fierce, honest love of a newborn claiming its mother as if to say, "I am here, and I am yours." By the next morning the shaky phone video was everywhere. The clip showed Zawadi on the restaurant steps, covered in rain and pain, with strangers gathered around her while people inside the restaurant kept eating. The camera trembled as it captured the moment the baby arrived, and the sound of that first cry echoed through every repost. Within hours, the clip spread across Daraja Quarter, then across the whole city. People added captions, comments, and quick reactions. Hashtags popped up like sparks in dry grass. Some praised Zawadi as a brave mother who brought life into the world with nothing but courage and the help of kind strangers. They called her strong, unstoppable, a woman who refused to break even when everything around her failed. Others focused on Kafil. They paused the clip again and again at the moment he turned his back, his shoulders hunched as if hiding. Memes appeared. Long threads filled with anger and disappointment grew by the minute. A few tried to defend him, but most people asked how a man could stay inside while the mother of his child was outside fighting through labor on cold steps. His name became a topic, a warning, a headline. Inside the restaurant, Kafil watched the video on his phone with shaking hands. Hearing his own name repeated in comments felt like a bruise that kept getting pressed. He recorded a short message to explain himself, to apologize, but the words felt thin even to him. He tried again, but nothing came out right. Every time he opened his mouth, he heard the baby's cry from the clip and felt his chest tighten with a guilt he could not escape. Customers whispered about him. Staff avoided his eyes. The kitchen felt colder, emptier, as if someone had taken the heart out of it. While the online world argued, real people on the ground moved in the opposite direction. Neighbors brought blankets and baby clothes to Zawadi. Someone sent hot soup. A group of women collected money in a small basket to help her buy what she needed. A local pastor stopped by and sang a slow lullaby that quieted the baby almost instantly. Kindness spread through the neighborhood just as quickly as the video had on the internet. The city felt split in half, anger on one side, compassion on the other. But no matter the opinion, every clip, every comment, every message kept returning to that one wet street where Zawadi brought her child into the world. A simple, messy moment that forced everyone to look closer at themselves and decide what kind of person they wanted to be. When the noise finally faded and the street returned to its usual rhythm, Zawadi found herself standing in a new kind of silence. The baby slept against her chest, warm and small, and she knew her life would never move the same way again. People kept stopping by with offers of help. Some came with shy smiles and a bag of diapers. Others brought home-cooked meals wrapped in foil. A young teacher from Meaty Plains offered to walk her through the clinic forms so the baby could be registered without trouble. All these small acts filled the room around her like soft light, yet Zawadi still felt the weight of choices pressing on her shoulders. She could accept the kindness and ignore the whispers. She could take legal action for being abandoned. Or she could choose a path that protected her dignity first, no matter how hard it might be. Her mother, Mama Tuma, arrived in a whirl of anger and love. At first her face looked like a storm breaking across the sky. She scolded Zawadi for walking alone, for trusting too easily, for carrying so much without telling her. But the moment she saw the baby, her expression softened. She held her grandchild with careful hands. Later, she sat Zawadi down and braided her hair the way she used to when Zawadi was small, fixing her clothes and kissing the top of her head as if she could repair everything with touch alone. Then one afternoon, Kafel walked in. His shoulders were smaller than she remembered, his voice faint as he asked if he could see the baby. He stood there shifting from foot to foot, eyes full of regret but also fear, like a man who knew he had caused a wound he didn't know how to heal. Zawadi listened without interrupting. The baby breathed softly against her. Her mother watched from the corner of the room, arms crossed, ready to shield her daughter if needed. Inside Zawadi, memories rose and fell like waves. She remembered the promises he once made with warm hands and hopeful eyes. She remembered the nights she called him and heard only silence. Standing before him now, she felt both the softness of old love and the sting of all the times he didn't show up. She took a slow breath, the kind that steadied her from the inside. It hurt, but it also cleared her mind. She knew her answer. It was a choice made of strength, not anger, a choice that protected her child, her future, and the woman she was becoming. And even though her voice trembled when she finally spoke, it carried the quiet power of someone choosing her own life. Months later, the world around Zawadi felt different. In Kijiji Harbor, she walked with her baby tied to her back, the tiny fingers gripping her blouse as if the child never wanted to let go. The sun was warm, the air smelled of sea salt and frying fish, and for the first time in a long while, her steps felt steady. In a shop window nearby, a muted news clip still played the old video of her giving birth on the street, but people no longer stared with shock. Now they nodded at her with quiet respect, offering small smiles or simple greetings as she passed. Across the road, Kafel's restaurant looked cleaner, calmer. He stood inside the doorway polishing a glass, though his eyes were fixed on Zawadi. When she walked by, his shoulders lowered and he gave a small, almost invisible nod. It wasn't a request and it wasn't an excuse. It was a wordless acceptance, a soft admission that he couldn't change the past, but he finally understood the weight of it. Zawadi stopped under a jacaranda tree, brushing her hand over the purple flowers hanging low enough to touch. The petals drifted down like quiet confetti. She smiled a tired, glowing smile, the kind that held both old tears and new hope. She shifted her baby gently and whispered a promise, one only the child could hear, that they would never feel the cold of being abandoned, not as long as she was alive to hold them. The camera would close on her face, worn, bright, unbroken, while life in the city moved on around her, forever marked by the night she proved her strength in the rain.